This episode features co-owner of Eddie's Wheels, Leslie Grinnell. Do you have a dachshund and have questions on topics like training and nutrition? Do you want a dachshund and need help finding a good breeder or locating a great rescue? Did you have a dachshund growing up and want to share some heartwarming or funny stories? Then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Lori Leduc. Welcome to the Wiener Dog Lover Podcast, the place to be for all things dachshund. Welcome back, fellow Wiener Dog lovers. I'm Lori Leduc. I want to start off by thanking everyone that's reached out to me to offer feedback and encouragement. I'm really enjoying speaking with people on various topics and areas of concern about our Dachsies. If you have a topic or someone you think I should speak with, send me an email, bark@wienerdoglover.com. I'm so excited to share today's episode. As dachshund lovers, we're always a little bit fearful that our beloved pet may at some point be diagnosed with IVDD. Thankfully, with all of the advancements in technology and vet care today, it doesn't have to mean the end for our companion. My guest today and her husband help make it possible for not only Dachsies with back issues or other deformities, but other breeds as well to continue to lead productive lives. My guest is Wiener Dog mom, part owner in Eddie's Wheels, and extremely knowledgeable on the subject of carts for dogs with IVDD. Let's hear what Leslie Grinnell has to share. I want to start off, Leslie, by thanking you for speaking with me today and sharing both your experience and expertise on working with disabled animals. Just a little bit of my backstory. I also had, for disabled animals, I had a blind-deaf shepherd mix that was born that way, and so I'm used to disabled animals. And then my mom actually had a dachshund that went down when she was 5 years old and was rehabbed, and that was so many years ago. So it was before all of the new technology that we have today that we're able to, really work with our pets with. So I know that your history had some disabled pets in it, and so maybe you could start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and your company and your soul companions and how you got started in this amazing career that you're now following.
Well, it was purely by accident. When I met my husband, he had a dog named Buddha. She was a beautiful blue Doberman, and she sat on my lap on our first date just to let me know where my place was in pecking order. So I sat in her seat, and she sat on me. Flash forward 10 years, and we've been married, and one morning, Buddha woke up paralyzed.
Wow.
And I was home alone with my 3-year-old daughter. My husband had just gotten a job as a mechanical engineer in Wisconsin. I took her, of course, to the vet. The vet said, well, we can't really see it much on this x-ray. It could be a herniated disc or a spinal compression or a spinal stroke. You should really take her to Tufts and find out. Well, this was 28 years ago. This was before there was a lot of that advanced technology that we have now. There was no MRIs for dogs.
Yeah.
And we were a little tapped out. We had just bought a house, and Eddie had just gotten a new job. That was not really on the horizon. So like a lot of people who are faced with this sort of a crisis, I was given two choices. You can euthanize her, or, you can take her home and take care of her. So that's what I did. I took her home. I had an LL Bean firewood carrier. I carried her around until my husband came home, which was only a few more days. And when he came home, he got together with a vet. This was before the internet. This was 28 years ago. And the vet said, well, there is a company called Canine Cart. And she had an old canine cart in her basement. She showed it to us. We put Buddha in it, and she immediately destroyed the cart because she was a big, strong 80-pound dog, and it was not really put together for her. But it gave Eddie an idea. And so he studied the skeleton of a dog and consulted with a vet and said, well, the bones are the mechanical part of anything, any human being or mammal. The mechanical part is the bones, so we'll support her on her bones. We'll support her on her pelvic floor and use her shoulders to carry the weight of the cart in the front. And so he went into the basement and made her a wheelchair.
That's awesome.
It took him a few weeks. When she was first put in it, she looked at me like I had two heads. Something wrong with your back, Mom? You've been doing so well carrying me around. then I said, if you want to go to the woods, you're going to have to do it in this. And we had a patch of woods across the street, and she took off, and I followed. And that's how it all happened. The structure of that cart is the same biomechanics that we use now. He welded a saddle that supported her on her pelvic floor, and she used it for about 3 months, and then she started using her legs again. And I was really surprised because she'd been dragging them. Mm-hmm. Called the vet and said, guess what? Buddha's using her legs in the wheelchair. And she said, well, there is a phenomenon called spinal walking. We don't understand it. I said, do you think it's going to get better than this? She said, probably not. I said, this is fine. I can deal with this. At least I'm not having to wrap her feet anymore, because there were no dog booties then 28 years ago either. I had been wrapping her feet in baby socks and to protect her from getting wounds on her feet. But then when she started walking in the wheelchair, she actually started to rebuild muscle and regain strength. And 2 or 3 months later, she stood up and walked on her own again without a wheelchair. And that was pretty amazing. She never used it again. She lived another 3 years. And so that was the inspiration for Eddie's Wheels. And people would stop me every day when I was walking this dog and tell me stories about the dogs that they had put down because they had become paralyzed. So we knew that there were other people who had been through this. But we were not interested in starting our own company at that point. Kind of put it aside for 10 years. My husband's job was traveling a lot, but when he came home, he would often be contacted by the local vet, and he would make another cart. His boss was very compassionate. He was a pug lover, and so he let him use the resources of the engineering firm to work on his design for a dog wheelchair. So he actually developed it over about 10 years.
Over the course
of the first cart was...
Sorry, over the course of 10 years?
Yeah, the first cart was really... Yeah, the first cart was made out of steel, and it was very heavy.
Yeah.
It probably weighed 25 or 30 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Once he started sourcing the right metals, he found the right aluminum, he found better padding. It evolved, and so now that same cart for a similar sized dog would weigh about 12 pounds maximum. Then in 1999, he decided to quit his engineering job and make doggy wheelchairs.
Wow, that's amazing.
And here we are with 16 employees, and we're in business, sending carts all over the world. So that's how it started.
That's amazing. So then you mentioned the difference in the steel that you use. So is the process for design or for manufacturing the chairs pretty much the same as it was when you first started?
Well, they're still all handmade. What happens is people provide us with measurements. Buddha's cart was made to her measurements. We have made over 21,000 wheelchairs now. We've actually learned what the normal proportions are for various breeds of dog. People measure their dogs or have their veterinarians measure them. They send in the measurements. And then we design a saddle that is specific to that dog. So if you think about how the huge variety there is in canines, the shape of the pelvic floor for a corgi is going to be flatter than it's going to be for a greyhound. I mean, you can just visualize that. Obviously, a dog that's a sighthound with really long legs is going to be shaped differently than a short dog that is designed for ratting. So we actually have different angles for different breeds of dogs, and those are really all based on the mathematics. It's so strange, but it's really all based on math. When the numbers come in, they indicate what the angle of the pelvis is going to be. And if you look at the saddle of our carts,
it looks a little
they're
bit
welded
like
in the middle.
It looks
just like a pelvis.
Yeah.
Yep. It looks like a dog's pelvis. If you looked at a model of a dog's pelvis or the bones of a pelvis, that's what the saddle looks like. So by supporting them on the pelvis, we actually don't have some of the problems that other dog wheelchairs have. And when we started the business in 99 and we announced it and we were getting feedback from veterinarians, veterinarians who were only familiar with canine carts said, well, the big problem with dog wheelchairs is that they chafe, and dogs end up with skin issues. Our saddle design does not allow for chafing. Every cart before ours held dogs up by soft tissue. They either had a sling in front of the rear legs or they had two leg rings that were not joined in the middle. So they were, in effect, holding them up by the skin. And that would cause chafing, especially if the dog was trying to use its legs. So we don't have that problem. The main difference between ours and every other cart on the market is that we don't have problems with skin issues and chafing. Soft saddles move a little more freely with the dog. They may look like they're supporting them on the pelvic floor, but in fact, with the saddle moving with every step, they're still going to be chafing.
So yours is a secure, like I didn't touch the saddle part when I looked at the one I looked at, but so that saddle that they rest in doesn't move at all.
Right, they move within the saddle. It's sort of like how you feel when you're riding a bicycle.
Oh, okay.
Okay? You're being supported on your pelvic floor between your legs, and your legs move freely. So that's how it feels for a dog in one of our wheelchairs. You know, in the 21,000 carts that we have built, we haven't had any problems with skin issues.
Wow, that's
amazing. And I personally cared for over 8 disabled dogs since 1999, and all of them have more or less used their legs in the cart, and we haven't had any problems. And most of them have been incontinent as well. So we've always had at least one disabled dog in our care. In 2001, we adopted our first dachshund. Because we were making so many carts for dachshunds, we decided that we should probably learn something about small dogs, because we'd never had a small dog. And so the St. Francis of Assisi Animal Shelter in Jersey City called us up to order a wheelchair for a 12-pound dachshund named Daisy. They told us that she had been surrendered because her family couldn't take care of her as a paralyzed, incontinent dog. And I said, well, is she cute? And they said, oh, God, she's adorable. So we drove down to Jersey City and picked her up. Wow. And her family took her back into the house so that they would be able to meet us. They were thrilled that she was going to be with us and have a job and be the Eddie's Wheels mascot. They were from Ecuador, and they told us that she was bilingual, but in fact, she only spoke Spanish.
Sometimes I don't think mine speak English, so I don't know what language they speak, but good for yours to speak too.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought she was deaf at first, but I was just speaking to her in the wrong language.
That's funny.
But Daisy taught me a lot. You know, she was incontinent. She had a UTI. I had to learn bladder expression. It took us, I think, 2 tries to get her cart just right, because dachshunds really have a very unique body shape. You know, their shoulders actually are pronated forward. The where the yoke sits on a dachshund is a little behind the shoulder blades. So the first cart we made for her was a little too big, a little too wide. We made her another one. You know, and dachshunds' rear legs are much longer than their front legs. Learning how to measure a dachshund to get a level top line and get the legs in the right position was a challenge. So we learned everything we needed to learn about dachshunds from Daisy. And after we had her for about 2 months, she also started using her back legs in the wheelchair, which really surprised me because she had 4 herniated discs. She was not a surgical candidate. She had spastic reflexes, but they were very disorganized. Being in the cart, she began to develop a walking gait pattern. It got so that years later, when I would take her to veterinary shows and vet hospitals and vet schools, people thought that she was just modeling.
Wow,
that she was actually a walking dog, because her gait pattern was that well coordinated, and she had nice nails on the back feet. But she really couldn't stand for more than 5 seconds without the cart, because her back still had those injuries.
Can we just go back to that, what you mean by she had nice nails on her back feet?
Well, when dogs are semi-paralyzed or doing what is called spinal walking, what's making them pick up their feet is their reflexes. Okay? Western science can't explain it, but it's a common phenomenon in dogs with intervertebral disc disease. And I would say that more than 50% of the dachshunds that we work with will eventually become spinal walkers over time. The initial injury can be very cataclysmic. You'll have deep pain, no deep pain response, and the back feet will be limp. If you continue to, stimulate the toes by having contact with the ground, eventually the reflex may come back. Nerves regenerate 1 millimeter a month, which is tiny.
Yeah.
So it can take months. It can take anywhere from 3 months, as it did for Buddha, to over a year for some dogs, depending on how severe the injury is. Spinal walking is a fairly common phenomenon, and some dogs will actually walk out of their carts like Buddha did, and others will just walk in their wheelchairs. My present dog, Scout, also known as Scooter, he's a spinal walker in his cart. He has a certain amount of rigidity in his rear legs. He doesn't get into his knees as much as I would like him to. He will, when he's tired, drag his toenails on the sidewalk. For long walks, I put boots on him. I don't want him to get wounds on his feet. For the most part, we have a 2-acre lot here. Most of the time, he's just running around the yard, and he's on gravel and grass, and he can tell the difference. If he starts feeling like it's an owie, he'll move over to the grass, which is great.
Yep.
This is good. When I walk him to town on the pavement, I put his boots on because I know that's a long walk for him, and he loves going to town. He will start dragging a foot, and then we'll end up with a wound on the top of his foot, and we don't want that.
Even though they're walking, it's still nice that they can still use their wheels for situations like that if they do a little bit of dragging.
Yeah. Now, dogs who are deep pain negative and are not using their legs at all, we elevate their feet, and we have what's called stirrups. Can put their feet up in little slings or on rolling stirrups, and if they're not moving their legs at all, you can just put their legs up in the stirrups. The stirrups don't hobble them particularly. Daisy had her feet in stirrups for a couple of months before she started using her legs again, so she could actually move her legs back and forth against the stirrup, and that was part of the process of getting her walking again, was taking her feet off the ground. Sometimes just bending the leg will change the neurologic pattern. It's something you play with, something you experiment with. What's going to give that dog the most neurologic response? So
do some people purchase the wheels at the same time as they're doing other alternative therapies like acupuncture or massage or the...
Absolutely. Yeah, I encourage people to go to rehab. I have had dogs in rehab. I've worked very closely with rehab professionals. I have a go-to rehab person here, Erica McElway. Her website is changeyourrange.com. She actually does FaceTime consultations all over the country with people and shows them how to help to rehabilitate their dogs. It's not just the cart that you have to do. As it would be for anyone who's dealing with a disability, the other parts of your body are working harder. Things like therapeutic massage, laser therapy, acupuncture, all those things are going to help with the overall biomechanics and comfort level that your dog's going to have. One of the main things that people don't look at is to see what's going on in the rear, and then they don't look at the front. Dogs who are pulling a cart for 10 years are going to build up a lot of strength in the front, but they also are going to be overworking those elbows and their carcasses. So you need to give them joint supplements. You need to give them glucosamine. Yeah. You need to give them fish oil. All of those things that are going to help to preserve the joints and the other parts of the body. Right.
You did mention about the fact that dachshunds are a little bit different in terms of sizing for a cart. How does somebody who has a dachshund go through the process of measuring for or getting ready to purchase a cart from you for their little baby?
Well, there's very explicit directions on our website and helpful videos about how to take measurements. So if people follow the directions there, they'll do fine. The real key to getting good measurements is not doing it by yourself. You can't hold up a dog and measure it at the same time. And a dog laying down is not going to give us accurate measurements for a wheelchair. First thing you need to do is to get your team together. And when we measure dogs at Eddie's Wheel, which we do about a dozen times a week, it's a team. We always put the owner at the dog's head, dangling a treat, keep their nose pointed straight ahead.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yes. And someone in the rear holding the dog up in a normal weight-bearing stance with their feet flat on the ground and keeping the dog's body straight. And then the person who's got the measuring tape can take accurate measurements. Dachshunds have very predictable proportions, but they do come in all different sizes and shapes. I mean, we've made carts for dachshunds as small as 6 pounds and as big as 30 pounds. It's always helpful if people send us a side view photo when the dog is being measured. That way we can have a visual to look at and confirm the measurements. But typically, dachshunds are the A measurement, which is the height to the top of the shoulder blades, is about the same as the length of the dog's body between the front and rear legs. We check those proportions. The length and height of the cart is adjustable. If people are off a little bit, it doesn't really matter. They can adjust the cart when they get it. We send directions and an Allen wrench. This is not hard. Sort of advanced Tinker Toys. It's round bars going through rectangular blocks and everything slides. It's not a big deal.
What is the lifespan of your set of wheels?
They're warranted for the life of the dog. A typical dachshund may get its cart when he's 5 and live to be 15 and 1 set of wheels.
Now, because they're so specifically made for that individual, what can an owner do with a set of wheels after, perhaps the dog no longer needs it? Is there any way to recycle them?
We offer a recycling program. People can send the cart back to us, and we can recycle it for another dog. We have a lot of carts on our deck right now that are in our recycling program. We pay for shipping back. We don't buy them back because you can imagine a 10-year-old cart might need a little bit of work. Might need a little work. The other piece is that a lot of people who have dachshunds have more than one. Some people will just hold on to them just in case another dog has an issue. If they're all within the same weight range, chances are, with some minor adjustments, the cart can be used for more than one dog. The width of the cart is fixed, and the size of the saddle is fixed. A 10-pound dog would probably not fit in a cart made for a 20-pound dog. It would be a sloppy fit.
Do you have then, because we are focusing a little bit more on the dachshunds, but most of the dachshunds have back issues. Have you worked with any dachshunds that have had other issues in which they've needed a cart?
Yeah, we have actually made a few front-wheel carts for dachshunds. Some dachshunds have cervical issues, which will affect their front legs. There's a unfortunately not unusual for dachshunds to have multiple lesions in their spine. Usually it's down in what they call the TL junction, where the thoracic spine meets the lumbar spine. And that's the sort of the fulcrum, There's right up to the end of the rib cage, there are ribs supporting where those vertebrae are. Then after the rib cage ends, there's nothing until they reach the pelvis. So that's the fulcrum that usually is where dachshunds' spinal issues happen. But occasionally there are dachshunds who end up with cervical issues. And when you have a cervical disc, it will affect your strength in your front legs. We have a couple of clients that have had multiple lesions over time. There's one little dog in Connecticut, Blue Dudley, who's now in a walker because she became quadriplegic for a while.
Oh, wow.
So we took her original cart and we turned it into a 4-wheeled cart for her. And she's doing fine in it now, but she is weaker in the front end than she used to be.
And so as a 4-wheel cart, did they push it or pull it? Like the owner must push it?
The owner can, many dogs can, once they overcome inertia, can move the cart. Okay, so it's getting started. That's the hard part. Okay, You can attach a leash and you can give them a little assistance and basically just walk. And the dog, if they have reflex, will pick their feet up and walk along with you. And we make a lot of 4-wheeled carts now. We make walkers and quad carts and hospital equipment, quad carts, adjustable quad carts for hospitals. It's a really wonderful tool because very often these sort of cataclysmic injuries do resolve themselves over time. So if you can just give animals the support they need, they can overcome them.
Interesting. Because I know, unfortunately, like because of the fact that I've had dachshunds in my life for quite some time, that with IVDD, a lot of times people end up doing euthanasia as thinking that that's their only option. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate for them and for their pet. Having some idea of some other options is definitely...
And the thing about dachshunds is they can have a perfectly normal life in a wheelchair. My dog Scout, who's a 20-pound standard dachshund, he is a very active, and he's 9. He's been in a cart for probably 3 years. He was abandoned when he became disabled. He was rescued off of Craigslist and ended up at a wonderful dachshund rescue down in Florida named Loveyloaves. And they had him for a couple of years. They were very hopeful that they'd get him walking again because he is a spinal walker, but he is still in his wheelchair, walking in his wheelchair. And a year ago, they put him up before Christmas looking for a permanent home, and I took him because he's a wire-haired, and I've always wanted a wire-haired dog.
That's so funny. I've had long hair, I have smooth, and I said the same thing. I'm like, I think there will be a wire mini in my future at some point.
Yeah, well, he's a wire standard.
Yeah. They're pretty unique in their appearance and their temperaments. It's a little bit different than the smooth and the long.
He's very calm and very self-possessed. He's not yappy like Daisy was.
What was Daisy? Was Daisy a smooth?
Daisy was a smooth brown and quite a yapper.
The smooths are a little more chatty.
Scout is very self-possessed. When we were kidnapping him and bringing him back from Florida, he just sort of resigned himself and said, "Oh, another set of humans to train. Okay." And he snuggled up on Eddie's lap as we drove north from Florida, and he's done an excellent job of training me. I had never had a male dog that I needed to express, and he's actually bladder retentive, so he needs help getting going, which is better than leaking constantly.
Yes.
You know, he got me trained. He said, "Okay, you got to spread out that pee pad first thing in the morning, stand me up, express my bladder." So we do that about 5 times a day, and poop happens, so you pick it up.
I'm a groomer. I'm very aware.
Yes.
Or they don't even realize they're doing it.
I'm not a big fan of diapers, so I would rather pick it up off the floor. And it's usually on the same schedule as the pee schedule. We're pretty good with that. Scout loves to be in his cart all day if he can. He will go outside in the morning and take himself down to the factory, and he likes to hang out downstairs with the crew and make sure that production is going along as scheduled. He likes to come upstairs and hang out with the sales crew and meet the dogs that come here. He takes his job very seriously about showing dogs how to use their wheelchairs. He's great. He loves to run around in his cart, and he never, I think he was a really suburban dog that was on a leash all the time. It's kind of great for him to wake up to the little wild thing inside of him, because he loves to chase the chipmunks and the squirrels in my yard now. Be off leash. He's quite the character. I really enjoy him. He's a great little dog.
That's awesome.
And very snuggly. And still really snuggly, like you expect a dachshund to be. Presses himself on my heart every night on the couch. That's what I need. So.
Yeah. No one can complain about that.
No.
The other thing is just, that's amazing. So did Loveyloaves contact you when they had put him up, or did you happen on their website and just were searching around?
They actually put it up on my Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
That he was looking for a forever home. And it was so charming because they put reindeer antlers on him, and he was running up and down the street in Orlando, stopping in front of the blow-up Santa, saying, "Santa, Santa, I need my forever home." So
is Loveyloaves based out of? Are they based out of Orlando?
Yeah, they're in Orlando, and she specializes in dachshunds. So Loveyloaves is a fabulous 501c3, and she will take the unadoptables. She has several dogs in wheelchairs and dogs with disabilities. So she really specializes in small disabled dogs, preferably dachshunds, though she's been known to take some other small breeds.
And what's her name?
Her name is Sherry Wells. Sherry and Ward Wells. And they always have half a dozen dogs in the house. And then she has a group of very responsible and caring fosters that help her take in these other dogs and rehome them. She does a great job.
Awesome, because actually I'm possibly going to Orlando in at the beginning of February, so I may give them a call and see maybe I could go out and meet them. That would be awesome.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So you just have the one dog then now?
I have Scout and I have Webster. Webster was born without front legs. He's also a standard dachshund.
Wow.
I adopted Webster in 2008. 2009. He came with his sister Willa, who has unfortunately passed on.
Did she have disabilities
was born
as well?
He was born without front legs.
No, his sister.
Yes, both of them were born without front legs.
Oh.
Yeah, we adopted them because the economy was tanking in 2009. Remember when the economy was tanking?
Yeah.
And
I don't think anybody forgets, but yes.
Yes. So we thought, well, what can we do? What do we need to get better at here? We had Eddie invented front wheel carts in 2001, but we had never personally cared for a dog with a front leg disability or worked or had a dog in a front wheel cart ourselves. And we actually felt like we weren't as good at this as we would like to be. There was a rescue group in California that contacted us to make front wheel carts for Willa and Webster. And I spoke to their physical therapist and said, tell me about these dogs. We're thinking about we should adopt a dog who needs a front wheel cart. And they said, well, they're wonderful little dogs. They're 6 months old, but you can't separate them. You have to take them both. So we took them both. I flew out to California and brought them back.
That's how I ended up with Julian and Hardy. There's two of them, dad and son. Yep. When I was looking, I was looking for one, and I was looking for something very specific, and two of them showed up, and a friend sent me their information, and I said, oh, should I take them both? And she said, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they were they were completely different, too. It was hard to believe they came from the same litter.
Yep.
Willa looked like a Chihuahua, and Webster looks like a Dachshund. And he's got a little underbite, and one ear that goes up, and one ear that flops down. and Willow is this very feisty, very confident, pushy little diva dog. And Webster was very shy and retiring. And I'm really glad we got both of them because I learned so much from their differences. Willa, because she had a shorter body and absolutely no front legs at all, just little shoulder nubs. Yeah. She could tip her cart over. She could do somersaults in her cart. And she did it all the time. Wow. Webster has got such a long body that it would be really hard for him to tip his cart over because there's so much body behind the wheels. But Webster also he's got deformed front legs. They look like chicken wings, and they're contracted. So they actually pull his spine out of alignment. And when he first got him in the cart, he had a really hard time figuring out how to move in it. And then I figured out that he wasn't weight-bearing evenly, side to side. So I took him to my canine chiropractor and got him adjusted. And that made all the difference in the world. That was a huge piece of insight for me. That, okay, just as with rear wheel cart dogs, you need to look at the whole dog. With front wheel cart dogs, you need to look at the whole dog and deal with the overall body structure and mechanics.
Which is
so Webster gets...
Sorry, I was going to... Which is interesting because I know sometimes people, when they're looking at getting a set of wheels or doing something, keeping a dog that's had this kind of issue, are concerned about how a dog will adjust or accept a set of wheels. Mm-hmm. And so that first situation where you said he was having a hard time might make someone be a little bit more panicked and that it was stressing out the dog or that they couldn't adopt. Yep. That's a good thing to mention, is that sometimes it's more than actually the cart itself, but something functional in the dog.
Absolutely. I mean, and we get this all the time. We see about a dozen dogs a week here. So we're putting strange dogs into wheelchairs for the first time.
Yeah.
And I would say 90% of the time they just take right off. But then there's the 10% where they don't. And then we have to look at why. Why aren't you taking off? It's usually something very simple. Like the height isn't quite right, or the balance of the cart isn't quite right, or we need to loosen the chest strap, that the chest strap will be so tight that they will feel confined by the wheelchair. There's usually a reason. Sometimes it's just nerves. I put a dog... Yeah, I put a little boxer in a cart on Saturday, and she was very nervous, and she kept looking around at the wheels and seeing them chasing her.
Yeah. They won't go away.
They don't go away. So, it's you have to be willing to work with the dog. Sometimes the temperament of the dog is just so high-strung, and they've gotten so used to struggling to walk that they put them up in a cart and they do a little freak out. But usually you can overcome that in 10 or 15 minutes, really. You just do a little desensitization, a little distraction with food, or just taking them outside and working out some of that adrenaline, and then things calm down and they walk. Some dogs don't even know that the cart moves. I had one woman call me last week and say, my dog's just standing there. And I said, well, tug him forward and make him walk. Show him that it moves.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it's important to nudge the owners a little bit.
She sent me a picture of the dog, and I could see that he was very paralyzed, that his legs were rigid in the rear. And I said, well, first of all, your dog probably hasn't stood up in a long time. And she said, you're right. And I said, so standing up is great for your dog right now.
Yeah.
He's saying, wow, I'm standing up. Now you have to show him that the cart moves. So, snap a leash on him and take him for a walk. And, she called me back in 10 minutes and said that worked. It was great, so.
That's a good point. It's not, they don't understand like we do that moves, that's what it's for.
Yeah. You can go for a walk now.
Yeah.
Particularly when they've been down for a long time and have been dependent on their owner carrying them. They don't realize that the cart is a substitute for the owner. There's a little bit of training. Most dachshunds, we put them in their carts, and they're trying to take off before we've even gotten the chest strap snapped. They're like, oh, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Dachshunds drag themselves around like crazy when they're paralyzed. So that's the downside of having a dachshund, is that they will drag themselves everywhere. And so that's really good to get a cart so that they're not, getting drag marks and carpet burns all over them.
I think you've answered pretty much every question I have. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you might want to share with somebody that's looking to get a cart?
People worry about the amount of work that it might be. Our carts are simple to use. It does make you a little more engaged with your dog.
I like that.
I like that. Yeah. I feel like it's a real gift. And, this disease is the simplest thing that we deal with at Eddie's Wheels. We also deal with neuromuscular autoimmune disease called degenerative myelopathy, which is fatal and takes a toll, an emotional toll on the owner. But even with those dogs, I feel like the gift they give us by making us into better caregivers and better dog owners is a good life lesson for all of us. And they are members of our family. They are very grateful for the help. I remember when my husband came home from a job when I was taking care of Buddha, and I was kind of waiting on her hand and foot and making her hamburger. And he said, how did this dog get you trained so well? I've been trying for years. And I said, she says thank you all the time. Multiple times a day. So I think that there's some really, really great life lessons. My whole life has been transformed by those lessons, and I'm grateful to them for that.
And we're all very grateful for the both of you as well. You've saved a lot and helped a lot of little ones from untimely ends and allowing people to be with their pets for a longer time. We thank you as well.
It's my pleasure. It's been a joy.
That's great. What's the first step? If somebody wants to inquire.
Our website is www.eddieswheel, Eddies with the IES, one word, .com. We also have a Facebook page where you can message us from there. Our Facebook page is sort of like our daily newspaper. We always try and make it fun and encouraging. It's not a website you have to be afraid to go to. You're not going to see any horrible stories. You're going to get happy news about dogs with disabilities having a great life. And we have a toll-free number, 1-888-2 211-2700. If you just want to call and talk to somebody, we have 3 people answering the phone, and we're happy to chat with you.
Perfect. So that will be very informative, I'm sure, for anybody looking to get started with setting their little baby up with a set of wheels.
Great. Thanks so much.
I hope that the information Leslie shared can help you if you find yourself in need of a set of wheels for your Doxy. I know from personal experience that the initial fear of dealing with a paralyzed pet can be overwhelming. It's important to remember that there's so many resources and options available, and although it may seem like a hard road, it doesn't have to be the end of one.
If you have a wiener dog story, an event, or a topic you'd like to see us cover, send an email, bark@wienerdoglover.com. Follow us on Instagram, wiener_dog_lover_, or Twitter @lovingwienerdog, or find us on Facebook, Wiener Dog Lover. Never miss an episode. Head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we put out a new podcast. I'd also be grateful if you would leave us a review. Until next time, Wiener Dog Lovers, this is Lori, Sheba, and the Wieners signing off.